Are single-player first-person shooting games dead? Well, we don't really know the future of the FPS genre. What we are seeing at the moment is an increasing trend in multiplayer first-person shooting games coming out without a campaign. Next to me, I have two beautiful hosts. We have Shane and Jack.
What was that laugh?
You're wearing a blazer. You're wearing a blazer and you got a haircut. You look
We're all
amazing.
beautiful.
Yes,
Thanks,
welcome.
thanks.
Now, I want to find out about what you guys think about this topic because you guys both play first-person shooters, and I think recently we've seen the Call of Duty betas come out where they're focusing solely on multiplayer. And I want to know, do we need a campaign to feel emotionally connected to a first-person shooting game, or are we happy just doing like a PUBG, like Fortnite Battle Royale thing?
It's different kinds of connections. Like, I feel like we've played, like a decent amount of Overwatch. You've played a lot of like Overwatch.
Yeah.
Like actually part of New Game Plus, like as a crew together as well. And I feel like because it's really easy, just like the formula of that game of jumping in, messing around, or maybe taking it seriously every now and then. Hopefully not too often.
That's right.
Like having the time to just kind of mess around and have fun with people, it kind of, it still gets you connected to the game without necessarily having a story mode there, even though Blizzard has that kind of like story content off on the side.
I'll get back to Overwatch because I think that's an interesting topic actually to bring up a little bit later.
They've
But
polished
I think
it.
It's a little polished there, but there's a lot of balls I think they've dropped later, like in the side. But hey, it's more, I guess, even about like if you want to go your competitive kind of stuff. Like, especially in your multiplayers, that's where a lot of the focus is going. Like, it's going into the kind of the esports, the multiplayer focus, and that's where the story is getting dropped on the side because everyone wants to have that like competitive, like very strong, well-developed game, and that's where like you have to focus most of your time.
I love that. And for me, the first-person genre came from back in the day when we had really shite internet and I lived in the burbs, and single-player narratives were like what I relied on because I didn't have great internet to play multiplayer on. So as gaming's evolved over time and technology's gotten better, I found that now developers and publishers have decided that they know the sweet spot and that magic formula to the first-person shooting genre that they've decided people don't need it because they can analyze the data. Now that we have internet always on connection, they can see really extensive information about when we're playing a single-player game, when we're giving up, when if we're going back to play it again, that replayability factor. And now they've decided that potentially money's where it's at in multiplayer.
I feel like that. Personally, I don't believe that. I think we still need some single-player experiences.
Well, I mean, that's Bethesda's entire business.
Yeah,
almost
but actually,
up until like soon, where 776 comes out.
But let's not go there also because that's another totally different story about bad storytelling. But hey, even back in those days, if you were talking about how you were just focused more on like that story, like single-player involvement because you had shitty internet. Back in my day, well, probably the same.
You ain't that old.
Beautiful.
So back in the same day, probably, is I had Unreal Tournament running on LAN, where it's like you still had there's that small little bit of like single player experience, but you still had that very strong competitive element, and you can go walk into a LAN and still come in and play with a very like low bit connection because you're playing on LAN.
But I mean, to your point as well about how developers have the freedom and more information than ever to be able to change the experience moving forward. I mean, like that's really is what defined games like Overwatch and like,
absolutely the community is really strong and vocal.
I mean, it's that, but it's also like how often do we get updates about like how many more Mercy nerfs are we going to get? And like it's just like them figuring out, okay, this is the best way to try and make it maybe the most fair so that people don't maybe want to walk away, but also how do we try and, in the case of like, trying to make people feel better about what they're doing, like in the case of like microtransactions, when it can go a little bit sour.
What do you guys think?
It's how they kind of like mess around after the game's actually released with that information.
Good call. I think back in the day, I really enjoyed single player and multiplayer games for FPS because you can drop in and drop out whenever you please, and you don't have to worry about if you're really time poor during the week and you've only got a few hours to sync, you just want to jump in and jump out.
20 minutes.
There's no like frustrations with not feeling like you're progressing at all and not getting the most out of the game because you can just capitalize the time you do have. But don't forget, it's extremely expensive to create a single player game and campaign. So not only are you paying voice actors to do the great
content is expensive.
100%. Those writers, the producers, that whole behind the scenes production is something you can skip if you don't have a campaign.
But I'd say like FPS is one of those ones where a lot of that production is actually even like slightly less in comparison to a lot of other like narrative storytelling games. I'd say the voice lines in most like CODs or story like that is less than like
it's a little bit harder to say because I feel like first person FPS like story-driven games have relied heavily on cliches for like the longest time. Like when we have a game like Spec Ops really like blow people away, you know, like the bar's pretty low.
Oh man, like that game was.
Oh no, I'm not talking crap about Spec Ops, but I'm like,
right.
that's like when you think about like single-player story-driven FPS games that has really stood out to people in the last like maybe 5-10 years. What else do you think of outside of Spec Ops?
I'd say maybe Black Ops 1 was a really interesting story.
It was really interesting.
Yeah,
but it still relied on a lot of cliches.
Yeah, and even maybe like, you know, you could go Halo Reach or something like that.
Yeah, true.
That was actually a really good one with this story. But yeah.
Do you remember back in the day when Black Ops 3 released on Xbox 360 and PS3 without a single player?
It was so dodgy.
Yeah, it was crazy. People were like, why didn't you just delay it and launch it, like release it when it was a complete full like premium package? And people had to download like a 40 gig update when single player was finally ready and there are consoles at home. It was crazy.
I like even you could push that argument to like not argument, but that kind of discussion even to like fighting games and stuff like that. Like that's happened exactly to Street Fighter 5.
Street Fighter 5,
Yeah. So like,
do you guys think you're yay or nay for single player FPS games? What do you think?
I think that at this point I don't really care that much about it.
Sure.
Like I never really got into FPS single player games quite that much. And multiplayer, like you said, is so easy to jump into, whether it's like Overwatch or maybe Black Ops 4 or Battlefield 5. Like these games that when you get, you know, like 2 or 3 other people, you party up with them. It's just so easy to just jump in, jump out, provided your timetables line up.
Shane?
Single player is the weird one. I'd say like I'd still enjoy story-driven ones, like even like Borderlands and stuff like that. But is that single player?
Yeah.
Is that single player?
Yeah,
That's the question.
It's up to you.
Like a cooperative, like story-driven games, I'm very much like for. But is single player maybe the right way to go, or is maybe just co-op the right way to go?
It's a really good perspective, and I totally agree. I think single player games are, to me, I need that emotional connection to the narrative and the characters I'm playing as. But as well as that, co-op is definitely the way to go for me.